Hi guys, welcome to Counterfire. My name is Connor, and today we're going to be breaking down the beef with Adam Friended. I'm going to apologize for reading in front of you, but this episode is scripted, that way I don't miss any important details. Now, you would think that Adam, a former liberal independent who likes to consider all sides, and I would be natural allies. Unfortunately, we are not. To be clear, I don't care that we disagree on a political outcome. I have plenty of people in my audience who are abstaining from voting because they hate both candidates, or who are voting for Trump because they think Kamala is a communist hiding her power level. What I dislike is his Weasley wussy way of communicating, where he can't simply say something with his chest and own it under pressure. So let's start at the beginning, and rather than breaking down clips, I'm just going to post links down in the description, if I feel like it. To my knowledge, this is the Sitch and Adam lore. Sitch is a successful YouTuber who made a few video essays that blew up his channel. He's not particularly active now, but he is by many measures a shrewd and insightful commentator. He is liberal in the sense that he likes individual liberty, democracy, and a Republican form of government, but he is anti-progressive because he believes a lot of leftists, i.e. socialist and communist ideas, get smuggled into progressive ideas. In my opinion, he is an anti-social justice warrior from the 2010s who didn't become a dissident right-wing nut job or otherwise insane. Adam is or was a liberal who also was pretty relaxed about marijuana, he hates racism, and generally prefers liberalism over progressivism, but also breaks from modern capitalist heterodoxy because he did a deep dive on modern monetary theory. My understanding of MMT is that national debt and spending don't matter much as long as there is correlated economic growth and activity. Sitch and Adam accepted the term centrist for a while, but Adam has made it very clear that he felt there was a bunch of inaccurate assumptions about them as commentators because of that label. He has since made it very clear to me that he is not a centrist, quote unquote, but an independent. Does not make any of his points less stupid. Several months ago, a 5-minute clip of Adam and his co-host was posted to Twitter. Sitch, correctly in my opinion, says that while he finds Democrats cringe and will not be able to vote for them due to their simping for progressives and leftists, he will also not be able to vote for Trump because he finds his actions around the 2020 election so egregious. He can't in good conscience vote for someone who is willing to undermine the entire Republican and Democratic process. I'll talk about Adam's position in the clip in a second, but I think we need to establish some things first. Sitch is just fundamentally correct. Anyone who watched testimony from Bill Barr, Trump's former attorney general, the attorneys general who were in charge up to January 6th, and Trump staffers know what he did. Trump was told dozens, maybe hundreds of times that he lost and that the fraud he was looking for didn't exist. It needs to be pointed out that Trump could prove this fraud out of court, and I would change my tune instantaneously. He doesn't need a judge to hear his case. Reporters, I, and the American people will happily hear his story. I would love to see the names of the tens of thousands of dead people, out-of-state voters, and illegal immigrants who helped steal the election, and then have each state answer to public pressure about why they let this happen. This hasn't happened because, to my knowledge, Trump doesn't have this evidence. He was lying then, he was lying waiting for this election, and he's lying now. Not just that, but the details of the chaos around the attorneys general is damning. When the attorneys general wouldn't create letters without evidence stating there was fraud in various states, he threatened to fire them and replace them with a willing sycophant, despite the fact that the sycophant had no criminal legal experience. Trump was threatening decades-long civil servants with the termination of their jobs because they wouldn't help him defraud the American people. Even without their endorsement, Trump went ahead with a plan recruiting fake electors from various contested states and encouraged them to show up at various venues to confuse the vote. Some of these electors were lied to by the Trump administration, who said their votes would only be counted if fraud was proven, something that never actually ended up happening. Trump encouraged Mike Pence dozens of times to throw out the vote and count the fake electors not certified by the states so that he could remain president. Vice President Mike Pence refused. So the allegations of fraud are unsubstantiated. There are fake electors confusing the vote. Mike Pence was refusing to reject the certified votes. So what's next? The Stop the Steal March on January 6th. Trump hoped that hundreds of thousands of his supporters showing up to Washington, D.C. to protest on his behalf would be enough to pressure Mike Pence to reject the vote and certify him as president. This was backed by a dozen Republican lawmakers who helped facilitate the march and also put a pressure campaign on Mike Pence. After the protest became a riot, Trump did little or nothing to stop the violence and spoke to multiple staffers, effectively saying he was happy with this result and he was happy that people who had betrayed him were in fear for their lives. Now, none of these facts are in dispute. There's an intense minimization campaign by Trump sycophants and embarrassed Republicans to reduce just how vile these acts are and how contrary they are to the Republic. The best cope that they can come up with is the fact that the process carried out the way that it should, and can you blame a guy for trying? Is Trump really such a bad guy for trying to exhaust every possibility of him staying in power? It has to be some of the most dumb cope I have ever heard, particularly in light of a Trump statement made in 2022. Correlated to the Twitter files, a document released that showed that parts of the federal government were in close contact with social media companies. Donald Trump claimed that the fraud had been proven, and not only had it been proven, but either new elections should be held or he should simply be declared the winner. He further stated that normal laws should be suspended up to and including the termination of the Constitution. This is the single most anti-Republican statement made by a leader of this country that I can think of. It takes a massive dump on the oath of office I took as a Marine and I took as a law enforcement officer, let alone Donald Trump's own oath of office. And to be clear, this statement was made in 2022. Donald Trump has had 4 years to prove outcome determinative fraud. We are 1 month away from the next election, and he has still failed to do so. Now, Sitch and Adam know all this. According to Adam's defenders, Sitch and Adam went to meticulous detail after January 6th, going over these very issues and actively fought their chat, which was coping hard about the situation. They use this as justification, so when Adam says something dumb, it's coming from a place of earnest, delayed mental development and not just cope, which doesn't make it better for me at all. Which brings us back to the clip. Adam Friended chid Sitch for his limited analysis, stating that he is getting hung up on a personality issue and that Adam is focusing on policy. The insinuation that I took from this repeated statement is that Adam is putting criticisms of Trump into the orange man bad category and therefore worthy of dismissal. Whereas the 4D chess giga IQ take is that we should analyze Trump's policies to compare him to the deadhead that was his opponent at the time, Joe Biden. There's a ton of things that are very stupid about this perspective, which I'll explain now. Separating personality from policy is total cope. When politicians cheat on their spouses, the public doesn't care that consenting adults had sex and it personally offended the spouse. They care because it means that the politician has poor impulse control, lied to some of the most important people in their lives, and were foolish enough to believe they couldn't get caught despite every micron of their life being under constant scrutiny. Trying to spin Trump's tenacity into a positive is so mind-numbingly stupid, it's sad I have to explain it. Trump didn't use his tenacity to build the wall, to secure the border, to protect us from international terrorism. Trump used his tenacity to set up a botched withdrawal from Afghanistan he threw like a hot potato at the incoming president, lied about electoral fraud, fired people unwilling to go along with his schemes, created a paper-thin scheme to retain power, and then tried to bully others into breaking their oaths to the Constitution. There is no one on this planet with a stronger military record than General James Mattis. He was thrown under the bus by Trump cultists. There's no one on this planet with a stronger conservative bona fides than Mike Pence, and he was likewise discarded. At what point do you ask yourself, are the dozens of former peers and employees who all say Trump is an incompetent, megalomaniacal a-hole correct, or is Trump the most persecuted man in history since Jesus? I can bet on which one is more likely. This also isn't something as discreet as Trump's actions surrounding January 6th is just his personality and the guardrails saved us. Trump slammed into the guardrails at 100 miles an hour, and it's only because of actual patriots who care about the Republic that he didn't burst through. This should be offensive to anyone who took an oath to the Republic, and it should be offensive to any quote-unquote liberal who cares about individual rights, that the former president tried to throw out 80 million votes through a lie. Furthermore, I'm not a Democrat. I don't give two fudges that abortion was repealed and pushed down to the states, but a repeal of Roe versus Wade and the ensuing chaos, injuries, and deaths should be offensive to anyone with liberal sensibilities, and yet somehow this is ignored by Adam, the genius independent. Now that we've eliminated the personality versus policy argument, let's talk about Trump's policy record. When Trump was elected, he held the House and the Senate, meaning that if he could convince his own party, then he could pass major legislation and effect his will. Where's the wall? Did Mexico pay for it? Are we secure from international terrorists? Did his photo op with Kim Jong-un secure lasting peace in the Korean Peninsula? Did his meetings with Vladimir Putin secure Eastern Europe from Russian aggression? Did the Abraham Accords solve the Israel-Palestine conflict? Did he unleash the American economy, or did he preside over the worst economic disaster in largest domestic spending since the Great Depression and insist he put his name on the checks? If you want to cry about inflation, inflation is caused by decreased economic activity coinciding with increased money supply. Trump oversaw the greatest shutdown of the American economy because of COVID and added $8 trillion of debt in 4 years. That's the entire budget of the war on terror, by the way. Now, you can explain to me that the 10,000 variables for why this deterioration of these issues are not Trump's fault, but that's not his perspective. If he had been in charge, none of it would have happened, except it did. We didn't get the wall. Mexico didn't pay for it. Jihadist terrorism is still a threat. Kim Jong-un is still running a hermit dictatorship. Vladimir Putin has disastrously killed 500,000 Ukrainians and 500,000 Russians. The Abraham Accords boxed out Palestinian leadership and likely contributed to October 7th. The American economy was unleashed only to be hit with a pandemic disaster that Trump fumbled and was happy to print money to try to escape. Bill Barr, Trump's former attorney general and confidant, said it best, that if you want Trump's policies, then Trump is the last person who can execute and achieve them. According to Barr, Trump doesn't have discipline, strategic, or linear thinking, is unable to set priorities, and working for him is a quote-unquote horror show. According to Barr, Trump's hyperbole, personality, rhetoric, and general unpleasantness cause backlashes to his policy that push them further away rather than making them more achievable. This is just descriptively true about Trump's first term. So with me being a right-leaning centrist, a Burkean conservative, someone who sympathizes with some neoconservative, social conservative, and fiscal conservative priorities, but always being charitable to my opponents, why did Adam coping about all this trigger me so hard? After all, I've talked to several Trump voters who have various pragmatic justifications, and I didn't spend half the energy yelling at them as I did at Adam. And the answer is because he's a wussy. I saw Pisco and Hutch pressing Adam on Twitter about this clip and him responding defensively. Being the charitable and kind fella I am, I asked Adam's position and he responded passive-aggressively. He said he had been clipped out of context, which I didn't really believe because the clip was 5 minutes long, and in my eyes, he was having a pretty good time pressing Sitch. Trying to get an answer, I summarized my understanding of his position, that Biden was a deadhead and that he was going to vote based on policy. I didn't even get into why I thought this was a stupid position. He insisted that I watch his content, a common defense he uses, and I dropped it. Pisco in particular can be pretty aggressive, so I didn't want to add to a dog pile. That being said, I'm not going to unhear something, and if you're a total wussy when I ask you a follow-up question, that's not my problem if you don't answer it. Sitch and Adam have been making tens of thousands of dollars for years doing political commentary. The bare minimum for a political commentator is being able to articulate your position and defend it under pressure. I heard Adam's position. He didn't want to defend it. Easy enough. Now, a month or two pass by, and I don't think much of it, but then the hippy-dippy goes down. Destiny and Pondering Politics are pressing Actual Justice Warrior, spawning a spin-off debate over whether or not AJW was being honest. Desi and I have a conversation about stupidity, delusion, lying, and audience capture, in which I mentioned that I think Adam Friended is audience captured. My rationale is as follows. Adam has claimed to be a liberal and relaxed guy with heterodox views that make him independent of either party. Based off of that lore, I think it would be safe to assume that he has liberal sensibilities even if he breaks with Democrats on a variety of issues. These issues don't necessarily offend me, but I think they would offend the average liberal. The Muslim ban, family separation, cozying up to dictators, saying you wouldn't back Ukraine as much as the international community, saying you would back Israel 100% and encourage them to go even harder in Gaza, threatening to revoke the licenses of news organizations, causing Roe v. Wade to be repealed, resulting in the death and injury of dozens of women in conservative states, lying about election fraud, trying to throw out 80 million people's votes, stating that the unproven fraud was so bad that the Constitution itself should be suspended. Not exactly a record that screams to me individual rights or constitutionalism. But there Adam was, pressing his partner about he was 4,000 IQ for looking at Trump's policies to come to a decision. The only way that this was possible in my mind was if Adam was swimming in a pool of contrarian pro-Trump thought in which all of these issues could be swept for, and it was actually everyone else who was wrong, not Trump. Since Sitch articulated almost an identical view to my own, I assumed that this was a terrible talking point about personality versus policy was coming from Trump sycophants in their audience. When I said this to Destiny, that the only way Adam could think this was if he was parroting stupid talking points from his audience, you would have thought that I killed his firstborn child. He summoned me to the Sitch and Adam show to stand trial for 1, daring to accuse him of audience capture, 2, not watching his content enough to know his position accurately, and 3, for being a shill myself because I've been working for a Democratic organization against Trump. What was so unbelievably weak to me about that conversation was I spent the first hour repeatedly asking Adam to clarify his position. He instead got on a fruity little high horse about how he wasn't audience captured, that I accused him of being a liar, and how I was a liar because I dared to criticize him while working for a Democrat organization. To clarify further why this is stupid, I asked him his position 60 days prior. He was a passive-aggressive pansy about it. I said exactly what I thought to Destiny, but I also said it to Adam's face and gave him an opportunity to clarify. Rather than clarifying his position to have a productive conversation, he insisted that I watch his content. After an hour of pulling teeth, I finally got him to say his position, which was almost identical to what was in the original video. Adam wasn't clipped out of context. He was scared to own a position that might be criticized in real time. Nothing he said changed my mind in that debate, and I stand by my assessment. If anything, my already strained respect for Adam evaporated in that conversation. I've talked to all kinds of people. ANCAPs, ANCOMs, fascists, authoritarian communists, progressives, liberals, hardcore conservatives, hardcore libertarians, Christian nationalists. If you name a political faction, there's a strong chance I've had a conversation or debate with them. The people who I had conversations with are the people who can articulate their ideas and back them up logically, even if I find their logic or their evidence flawed. These conversations would often end up friendly if contentious if they were likewise willing to let me stake out a position and explain my rationale. The people that I yell at are people who can't back up their ideas because they're either too stupid or too cowardly to own what they believe, or too dense or obtuse to receive incoming information. The debate that Adam and I had could have been 10 times more interesting and productive if he had staked out his position, articulated why he believed it, and let me criticize it. But he's a total baby and can't worm his way out of a wet paper bag. And so here we are. Now, you might ask, why now, Connor? Why did you decide to make this video? It's because after months of clutching his pearls that people accused him of sweeping for Trump, after months of him supposedly waffling, after throwing a hissy fit that I said he was considering dumb ideas outside of his supposed moral values, Adam just announced on Twitter that Kamala Harris, the Juris Doctorate state attorney who dog-walked Donald Trump in a debate, was too retarded for his vote, and he would be therefore voting for Donald Trump. We are no longer following each other on social media, so to spare him a reply dogpile, I screenshotted it and posted it on my timeline. Unsurprisingly, he came over to the reply section and coped about how I was only paid to have my opinions and actually have betrayed everything I've ever believed in. To be clear, I've been never Trump since 2015. I didn't vote for him in 16. I didn't vote for him in 20. I've been a pretty loud critic of MAGA since I started doing political content in late 2019. I was recruited to a Democrat political organization because I was a never Trump Republican. I didn't become a never Trump Republican to join a Democrat organization. Adam and his band of retards gave me pretty dogshit talking points in the replies, but I won't bore you with the details. Suffice to say, Adam did not take me up on my second offer for a debate, which just confirms to me that he's an audience-captured pansy who can't back his positions under pressure, who is passive-aggressive and falls apart like wet tissue paper under scrutiny. Which brings us to the end for now. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, dislike, and become a YouTube or Patreon member if so inclined. I appreciate you watching. Godspeed.